In the 1950s and early 60s, heart and vascular surgery was primitive, still in its infancy. A world of surgical techniques, medications, and technological advances was still unknown, yet to be discovered. Young Dr. John Ochsner was a pioneer, setting off on a daring, challenging journey that would lead him to achieve historic milestones and surgical innovations.
Today, they always go to watch somebody do it. They learn how to do it before they ever do it themselves. We didn't have that nicety. We had to do it ourselves. We didn't have anybody to teach us. It was a brand new field. So, Lord knows, I took a lot of antacids in the early days, the night before a lot of operations, and I'd be very scared to death before them. You know, I wasn't looking forward to it. We would be nice cold sweats getting ready to do the operation, but we had to do them, and somebody had to start somewhere.
Part of his pioneering effort was that he was able to do that, right? I mean, how many people could do that? How many people could lay in bed at night and think, all right, tomorrow somebody's life is going to have to be in my hands, and I'm just going to have to make it up as I go along, right? And not get cold feet.
And to just picture that and think about that is just, to me, mind-boggling. I mean, how do you do that? But he was the person who would do it and did it.
That willingness to rise to that challenge is pretty extraordinary.
Because he rose to the challenge and so often overcame it, he enhanced, extended, and saved the lives of thousands of patients.
Without Dr. Ochsner, I probably would not have lived past about the age of 30.
If he hadn't existed, I wouldn't have a husband, I don't think.
Had it not been for Dr. John Ochsner and his team and the follow-up care that I've had at Ochsner, I just wouldn't be here today.
He rose above everything else and everyone else in the community and became nationally and internationally known.
Johnny was born a star. He was absolutely born a star. The drive, the compassion, the talent.
When I was in the first grade, the teacher, would always get up and ask the students their name and then say where you were born. And so I gave my name, and I was basically honest, so I told I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. But I hasten to add that my mother and daddy were there on their honeymoon. So the moral of the story is I'd rather be a bastard than a Yankee.
Young Johnny was the second oldest of 4 siblings. His sister Isabel, Sis, was the youngest. Both describe a wonderful childhood with a mother, Isabel, who raised them, and a strong disciplinarian for a father.
Yes, he was a disciplinarian. But believe me, we deserved everything we got. He was always totally fair.
He insisted that we have dinner every night together when he was in town. But it was a little hard because we had to wait till he got home. And that could vary from 6 to 10. Consequently, it wasn't a happy time for us, except when he got home at 6, which was very rare.
Their dad, Alton Ochsner Sr., was just 31 when he was named chairman of the Department of Surgery at Tulane Medical School. He was a medical care maverick, a rising star, unafraid of controversy. In 1936, he was the first to identify a link between smoking and cancer.
And since we know there is a cancer-producing agent in cigarette smoke, it's perfectly logical to assume that the unprecedented increase in the incidence of cancer of the lung, which is increasing more than any other cancer in the body, is due to cigarette smoking.
The medical community and Dr. Alton Ochsner's own professor at Washington University in St. Louis, Dr. Everett Graham, fought him on that.
He said, Al, you've got to get off this kick about smoking. He said, your colleagues will begin to think you're a kook.
Really?
Yeah, and Dad wrote him back. He said he didn't care what his colleagues said. He knew he was right, and he said, Dr. Graham, you better quit smoking yourself or you're going to get cancer of the lung. And not long after he did, and he wrote Dad back again, I wish I'd listened to you.
Of course, eventually, Ochsner and the anti-smoking campaign stubbed out the views of those denying ill effects, as overwhelming evidence linked tobacco to cancer, plus a series of other debilitating ailments. Orthopedic surgeon Dr. Locke Ochsner, Dr. John Ochsner's son, says his grandfather had the perfect personality for that decades-long battle.
My grandfather was someone who didn't compromise. And it's amazing, some of those traits can be very good, and sometimes it can be bad. Going up against all the other industries, only someone like that could do that.
Just before Easter 1941, a messenger delivered small pouches like this to 5 prominent doctors planning to start a group practice clinic, each pouch containing 30 dimes, 30 pieces of silver, a reference to Judas betraying Jesus. Local doctors with solo practices were afraid the group practice clinic that Alton Ochsner and his 4 partners planned would create unfair competition.
Only someone who, is not afraid and can be kind of hard-headed thing could go and start a clinic when there's no community support for it.
The founders envisioned a clinic very similar to the Mayo Clinic that would be able to pool resources of physicians so that they would have the knowledge of not one specialty but all specialties, and with that have the advantage of making a better diagnosis and making it probably with the least amount of expenditures of money.
John's father was the man who decided early on that Ochsner was the first completely open, integrated hospital in the South, and it was.
She said, of course, this hospital will be integrated from day one.
Ochsner Clinic took over a surplus military building near the Huey P. Long Bridge, now known as the Elmwood area. That Ochsner Clinic, affectionately called Splinter Village because of the wooden floors, made important innovations in medical care.
They had the first recovery room, which then became an intensive care unit. And then they formed the first family waiting room, where the doctor came out to talk to the family after the operation. And those are 2 things that every hospital in this country has.
The towering figure of their father shaking up the medical community was undoubtedly a powerful influence on young Johnny and his siblings.
He sat my brothers down one time and he said to them, now, just because I am this surgeon is no reason for you all to feel that you have to follow in my footsteps. Absolutely not.
Then she says her dad made a comment that was more like a challenge.
He said, and I don't think any of you could make it.
We almost thought we had to be doctors. We just thought, we wanted to do what Daddy did.
All 3 boys became surgeons. When they were in pre-med and medical school, Sis says dinner took on new dimensions.
Sometimes we had bottles of organs at the table so they could tell Daddy what they had learned that day. As the only girl, it was a little interesting to say the least.
John went to college